Hello everyone, my name is Amanda and welcome back to another video of the Planty Mandy. Alright, so as spring and summer approach, depending on where you live on the planets, our plants start to grow, or our Hoyas actually start to grow new leaves and they start to form peduncles or even flower. One more things also start to grow and they are pests. So yeah, so those annoying little bugs that may potentially kill our plants. So today we're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about what are they, we're going to talk about where they come from, because they always seem to just appear in thin air. We're going to talk about how to prevent them, how to treat them, as well as a couple more common types of houseplant pests that we may encounter. So let's get started. Alright, so first of all, what are pests? So pests are pestilentious insects that may potentially kill our plants because our plants are their main food source. And that's why in spring and summer, when our plants, are growing, they are there because their food are there, right? That's just how the ecosystem or the food chain works, right? So yeah, so why do we have pests? So a lot of time, I would get comment on my pictures that people say, oh yeah, that's a great plant. I have the same plant, but then, it just seems like out of nowhere, this mealybugs just came out, or this whatever pestilentious insect just came out. Where do they come from? So that's a great question because I agree with you. So sometimes it seems like your plant is fine, they are always inside, you never take them outside, and all of a sudden, it is infested, right? So there's a couple of ways that the pests can actually get on the plants. So I would say, number one, if your plant is unhealthy, right? So it's if it's weak, if it's you overwater it, you underwater it, you give it too much light, you're not giving it enough nutrients, right? Your plants basically would release a chemical signals that is attracting the pest to come onto the plant, right? So you have to think about this way, plants really communicate with each other or communicate differently than humans. So right now I'm talking to you verbally, I'm communicating with you verbally, but obviously plants cannot do that. So what they do is, like I said, they will release a chemical signal. So when your plant is not healthy, they will release this chemical signal that may attract pests to the already weakened plant. So that's how the pest was able to take advantage of a already weak plant and destroyed it and eventually killed it. So that's one of the ways. And sometimes if there is airflow or anything like that, some of these pests are really small. They could just basically get in with a whiff of air, so you feel like it just appeared from nowhere, but it's actually not true. They're actually coming from somewhere. Maybe you leave the window open, there's a whiff of wind, and then some of the pests come with the wind. And last but not least, which is something that we can control actually, is you could bring pests home with a new plant. So let's say you went to a garden center, you got a plant, or you get a plant in the mail, right? You visually inspect the plants and you don't see any pests on it. So you're like, oh, cool. So you put your plants with the hundreds of plants that you already have on your windowsills. And but what you don't know is there might be very small. Some of the plants are microscopic. You have to use magnifying glass to see them. Or even sometimes there may be no adult pests on your plants that you can visually see, but there could be eggs, there could be larvae or pupa in the soil. And what's going to happen is you didn't know that, you put it with the your other plants, and then they hatch, they become adult bugs, and then they infest your other plants. So there are actually this couple ways that your plants can get pests, even though you feel like it's actually appear from nowhere, but it's not. So prevention is always better than treatment, right? So we want to do our best to prevent our plants from getting pests. So when we are looking at, or when we want to figure out how to prevent pests, we have to look at how do they get them in the first place, which refer to the last couple points that we talk about, how do your plants get pests. So I would say, first of all, keep your plants healthy. try not to, underwater it, overwater it, give it too much light, or fertilize it like regularly. So that is one of the best way to actually prevent pests, is to keep your plants healthy. Because if your plant is healthy, it will be less likely for the plants to attract pests, right? So that's number one. And number two, really isolate your new plants. So if you get a plant, again, from the garden center or in the mail, I normally would isolate that plants for maybe a week, just to make sure that there's no pests coming with it. Again, because, even though you cannot see any pests visually on the plant, there might be something in the soil or something, just hiding, or something that is just so tiny that you miss. So it's a safe measure just to like separate that new plants for a little bit, and just observe it, check it, and make sure that there's no pests coming out. And then from there, maybe in a week, you can safely put it, with the other plants. And the other thing I also do on a regular basis is I check my plants every day. So every morning, right, when I walk by my plants, I'm sure a lot of you guys do, like you would walk up and then admire it and see, oh, there's a new leaves, da 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 da. Same thing, you want to do that, as a pest inspection. So you will go up to the plants and, just look at any nook and cranny, any abnormality, if your plant is leaves getting yellow from nowhere, or you see the plant leaf is being scraped or anything like that. So that way you can actually prevent further infestation and then treat your plant as soon as possible. So those are the couple of things that I would do to prevent pests. And one last thing I want to mention too is I leave it to the last because I know it's not for everyone, because it does involve chemicals. So I do use systemic pest control, as a preventive measure. So I normally use a granules form. So what you do is the systemic pest control come in a bottle in granules, and then you can sprinkle those granules on top of the soil, right, if you do use soil. And then you will just mix it in, for a little bit, maybe into the top inch of the soil, and then you'll water your plants. So that's basically how I use it once every 8 to 10 weeks, I would say, as a preventive measures, for pests. So again, I leave it for the last, or as an optional thing, because I know that not every one of you guys are comfortable with using harsh chemicals in your house. But those are the couple of things that I do to prevent pests. All right, so if unfortunately you fail to prevent pests, and then you're like, oh no, I found pests on my plants, what do I do? So there's two main routes you can use. Number one, it's kill them organically, without using harsh synthetic chemicals, or you can kill them inorganically. Is that a word? So meaning that you use chemicals to kill them. So they both have their pros and cons, and I know that we as plant parents have different reasons that we want to use chemicals or we don't want to use chemicals. So I'm gonna go over both routes to my best knowledge, because I do use both methods, and I can tell you my experience or the results of me using them. So to start, let's talk about the organic stuff first, all right? So organic, we want to use organic pest control because, for example, if we're growing fruits or food, right, we don't want to use any harsh chemicals because it's gonna go into the plants and then you're gonna eat it and then it's not good for you or it will poison you, right? But also some people I understand that have kids or have pets, that like to get into the plants, and we don't want them to get poisoned. So some of us choose to use organic pest control, which is great. So I have a couple examples here. So one of the most common or normal organic pest control you'll see on the market is neem oil or horticultural spray or horticultural oil. So there's pretty much all works similarly. So I have an example here. I think this is there you go. So this is an insect killing soap. insect killing soap, right? So yeah, so it works really, and also I have this here, and also I have this like plant wash here. So yeah, they are both like they both works really similarly. So because they're organic, so they're not like, they're not using chemicals to kill the pests, but instead what they do is, okay, you spray it on the plants, right, over your plants where the pests are visual. And then from there, this oil or this soapy substance gonna coat the insects or the pests, and it will suffocate them and kill them. So that's basically how most of the neem oil and insecticide soap work. So it's a great way to, if you have pests but you don't want to use chemicals, it's a great way to do it. But there's a couple of things that you will want to pay attention to if you do want to use neem oil or like horticultural spray or insecticide soap. Is number one, they are not systemic, so they only kill on contact. So meaning that if I have a plant here and then I see some mealybugs, let's say, right, a type of a pest, and then I want to kill them, so I would spray horticultural soap or horticultural spray on it or neem oil on it, and then from there, all the mealybugs that come into contact at that moment with the soap or the oil, yes, they will die. However, if you miss a corner, if there's some, really, really high and you don't see it, or if there's like eggs or larvae or pupa, in the soil, they will remain. And you may kill all the visually, like all the pests that you can visually see at that moment, at that point. But if any of those conditions that I mentioned exist, maybe a few days later, you will see the pests start coming back, right? So that's one of the, disadvantages, I would say, in using insecticide soap, insecticidal soap, and also horticultural spray or neem oil, right? The other thing you also want to pay attention on if you do decide to use neem oil or like this kind of thing is, because of soap is, if you're going to spray neem oil, do not spray it under the sun. Like, do not do it when the sun come out, or if you have a really hot, or bright grow light. Because what's going to happen is, when you spray the plants, the droplets on the leaves will act as a mattifying glass, right? Just like, when you put the sun for a mattifying glass, and then it's going to burn your leaves. And if your leaf is burned, which is considered a type of environmental damages, it won't come back. It's just going to look ugly, right? So that may bother you, right? And like a big, if you burn it a lot, then the leaves, all the chlorophyll will die, and you will have to cut off the leaf because the leaves are no longer able to survive. So yeah, so that's the other thing you want to pay attention to. So if you're going to use neem oil or insecticide or horticultural soap, I cannot say horticultural soap, make sure you use it in like a cool day with no sun. Or like if you're going to do it indoors, just make sure that, you don't shine like a grow light right after you do it. Last but not least, all right, I noticed that if you use neem oil or horticultural oil on your plants, and if you don't like clean it afterwards, it will have this like oily substance or residue that stay on your leaves, and that might block your leaves pores and prevent the leaves from like perspiration. So that's the other thing you will want to consider too. So that would be the couple of things that, I would suggest you to pay attention on if you do decide to use neem oil or insecticide soap or horticultural oil. So yeah, so they all works really similarly. So that would be my suggestion. And one more thing, it's even though they are not harsh chemicals, they are supposed to be organic, it doesn't mean that they are completely harmless, okay? So there is such thing called neem oil poisoning. So you can get poisoned by neem oil. And then also, for example, right, in this plant wash, there is peppermint oil, citric acid, soybean oil. So all of this stuff, if you are coming in contact with a large amount, it can also be an irritant. So it may like, irritate your skin or anything like that. So even though they are organic, non-toxic, natural, so make sure that you also treat them, carefully, maybe wear gloves or anything like that, and just don't use too much of it, right? So that one of the organic pest control measure you can use, right? So the second thing I want to mention, it's very specific for fungus gnat. So, okay, fungus gnat, I wouldn't consider that as a pest because a pest is something that would suck the life out of your plants and kill your plants. But fungus gnat, it's more or less, they just eat the fungus in the soil. So they appear most of the time when you are overwatering. But still, they're very annoying and most of us consider them as a pest. So I would just put it in there. So this thing that works specifically for fungus gnat, it's called mosquito beads or BT, right? Bacillus. So they look like this. They are this like granules thing. So there's a couple of ways to use it. You can either sprinkle it on top of the soil and mix it in, you know, on the top, you know, with the top inch of soil, and then water your plants as usual. So that's one way to use it. The second way to use it is you can soak this in water overnight and then use those water to water your plants. So it's amazing because it only kills fungus gnat or mosquitoes. It doesn't work on any other like insects or like, you know, animals. So if you don't want, if you have an outdoor garden, like you don't want to hurt the bees, but you have a lot of fungus gnat, this will be a good thing to use. So yeah, so that would be specifically for fungus gnat though. So yeah, just make sure you remember that it's not going to kill anything else. And speaking of fungus gnat, another organic method, which is the non-toxic method, is use yellow sticky trap because they do attract to something yellow. So they will like fly onto the yellow sticky trap and then they would like just stick there and die. So that's the other organic method you can use. And a couple other things that I want to mention too is the other thing you can do is using this thing called Acer-Max. So Acer-Max, used mainly in the hydroponic community. So meaning that, you know, if you go in knackers or if you go in ponds, right, you cannot really mix the systemic control granules into your water because they won't melt. I try it, they won't melt. So you may want to use something, you know, like Acer-Max to organically to kill the pest that is bordering your hydroponic, you know, plant, right? So Acer-Max, it's the main ingredient, if you look at the bottle, is azadirachtin. So azadirachtin A and azadirachtin B. So those are the extract from the neem tree. So remember neem? So it's the same thing from the neem oil. So it's organic, it's extract from a plant, and then it acts as a insecticide, miticide, and nematicide, right? So I also want to mention that as here you can see, it's separate insecticide and miticide. And you know why? Because mite is not an insect, right? So if you go out and then you buy something that say insecticides, it will not kill the mites. So if you have spider mites and you get an insecticide and then you think that's going to kill the spider mites, it won't. So make sure that you also pay attention to stuff like that. I think it's, I just want to bring it up because, you know, here is a good example. And that's why it separates insecticide and miticide. So yeah, so those are two different family of, well, not insect, but animals, right? So yeah, so those are the couple things that I think as houseplant parents, we use more commonly to kill the pests or manage the pests organically without harsh synthetic chemicals, right? The last thing I want to mention, and I save it to the last because I don't think it's a super common thing or super easy thing or super accessible thing for a lot of houseplant parents, and that is integrative pest management, meaning we're going to put beneficial insects to eat the pest. So there's a lot of benefits, obviously. Number one is, you know, it's natural, like it's organic. It's basically how our ecosystem works, right? Like you have our, you know, when you have a prey, like, you know, let's say in this scenario, the plant is the prey and the pest is the predators, right? Are the predators, right? So when you have a prey, you always have predators. When you have predators, you always have prey. So same thing applies to the pest. So if the pest is a prey, we also have a lot of predators that would eat the pest, right? So the more common one you can see is ladybugs, right? It's a type of beetles. You can find it in most garden center, in fact. And I also see some green lacewings and also some praying mantis in the garden center as well. So yeah, those are the beneficial insects that you can get. So what you do is you're gonna put them on your plants, and then they will basically just go eat the pests because those are their food, right? So yeah, so it's a great way to get rid of pests organically. Also, you don't have to do anything. You just put them on there and then they will do their job. It's like you're having an army to help you to get rid of your enemies even when you're sleeping. So that's pretty cool, right? So yeah, so those are, and also with like, you know, horticultural soap or like, you know, plant wash or even Asamax, you have to like reapply it, right? So the benefits for having beneficial insect is if you have enough food on your plants, meaning that you have enough pests on your plants, those insects actually gonna reproduce. They're gonna find a mate, they're gonna make beneficial insects babies, and then they're gonna keep working for you for generations to come. So that's the other good thing too, is like, you know, they will continue to work for you, right? So after all the good things, I have to give you the other side of the story, right? So I personally have purchased beneficial insect before. So I remember I bought like, we have some ladybugs, and then I put them at my front flower bed, you know, with roses and lavenders because there's tons of aphids on it. And I have about 1,500 ladybugs, and within 2 days they're all gone. They just flew away. So yeah, so I told this story because I want to show you, you have to understand the characteristics of the pest and the beneficial insect in order to purchase the correct type of beneficial insect. So ladybugs have a characteristic is they like to fly to light. And when the weather is warmer, they move a lot faster in comparison to when the weather is cooler. So meaning that, you know, if you, let's say, don't have enough food for them, or if you put them out in the light, in the warm, they're just gonna fly away and they're not gonna really like do a lot for you. So that's the thing that you have to pay attention to, right? And obviously you want to purchase the type of beneficial insect that would take care of the particular pest you're looking for. So for example, there is like spider mite predators, so those are for spider mites, right? However, like most of the beneficial insects like green lacewing or beetles or praying mantis, they're pretty good generous, so they would eat like anything. And if you can, to prevent them from flying away too quickly before they finish their job, I highly recommend you to get larvae, like the larval stage of the beneficial insect instead of the adult one, because they can't fly yet and they want to grow. So they're super hungry, they're super ferocious. Like you put them in the, you know, on the plant, they would eat. They would just eat and eat and eat and eat. So in fact, they're so hungry that if you have them to ship to you, right, they actually have to put them in like individual compartment. I don't have one right now, but I'll show you a picture. So they will be put in like a individual compartment, because if you put them together in the shipment and they're really hungry, they would eat each other. So that's how hungry they are. So that's why I feel like if you can get larvae, it's always better to get the baby stage of the beneficial insects, because that tend to stay on your plants for longer, meaning that they tend to eat or destroy the pests more effectively than the adults. And speaking of shipping, that's the other not disadvantage, but that's maybe the other thing you have to consider when you want to get a beneficial insect is the shipping is not cheap, because they are living things. So you don't want to really ship them like on a regular mail schedule. You want to ship them in express. So that will come with a higher cost of shipping. So I don't know about like other you know, countries, but like, you know, with, for example, United States Postal Service, like a one-day express shipping would be like $40, like $40 just for the shipping, right? Not counting the insect. So the insect itself is not too expensive. It is the shipping cost, that, might come with it. So that will be the other thing you have to consider if you want to use beneficial insects. And last but not least, they come in bulk. Like you cannot buy 50 green slaving larvae. You have to buy, I don't know, 1,000 of them minimum. So I'm talking about minimum. So you may have to get like a couple thousand of them. So the reason this may be an issue to a lot of us because we have to have a lot of plants in order to sustain or like to make it sensible to purchase so many beneficial insects, right? So if you only have like, I would say if you have anywhere under like 100 house plants, it is not worth it to use beneficial insects because number one, you don't have enough food for them and they're just gonna die or fly away. And your money will just, go down the drain. And it's also not humane for the insect because there's no food, right? And then you ship them all the way, you put them here, and then they just eventually die off or fly away. So yeah, so that's the other thing you have to consider. Is another story if you have like, what I do is, I would have a couple of friends who also need beneficial insect and then we'll purchase one thing, like a bulk, like 1,000, and then we can like, separate them and share the cost. So that's a method that you can consider. So yeah, so those are the couple organic, methods that I can, that I personally have experience with that I can tell you about. So let's recap really quick for the organic method. Number one is the neem oil or the insecticide soap or horticultural oil. Like they're all like very similar stuff. So basically they just coat the body of your insect and then suffocate them and kill them. And they're not systemic, so they only come when it's get on the insect itself. And then the other thing is like where we are specifically for fungus gnat, which is mosquito beads or BT. And then we have something called Asamax, which is something that you use hydroponically, like if you go in neckers or ponds or anything like that. And last but not least is beneficial insect, which is the predators of the prey. So that's it. So next we're going to talk about the inorganic method, which is, one that involves toxic, synthetic, harsh chemicals, which is not for everyone, right? So I personally, I would say like 80% of the time I use chemicals. Like, I use inorganic method because this is just for me personally in my environment. I find that a lot more effective, a lot faster. And also most importantly is I do not have kids, and my dogs, knock on wood, do not really care about my plants at all. They're not going to take a bite. So I am comfortable to use chemicals. So this is just for my environment. So if you have any of those concerns that I mentioned above, make sure that, you go for the organic route, right? Not the harsh chemical, kill everything. Synthetic routes like me, right? But I know some of you guys are like me. You guys like to, kill them efficiently and fast and effectively. So I'm going to show you what I use, right? So most of the time when we talk about inorganic method, we're talking about insecticides or miticide. So I use a lot of systemic pest control. So this is what example of it. There's like so many of them. So this one is it's a liquid form. So what you do is you just mix it with your water and then you water the plants, right? So make sure that you follow bottle instruction. It tells you specifically how many tablespoons or how many cups, depends on how big your area is, or what type of plants you're using. Because if you're going to use it outside for tree and shrubs, it's going to be different when you use it inside for like house plants, right? Container plants, right? So make sure you read this carefully. So for example, this one is provide 12 months of insect protection. So that's pretty good. So I also use granule forms. I ran out of it, but the granules form that I use lasts for 8 to 10 weeks. And that's more for the indoor house plants. So those are the stuff that you want to pay attention on when you decide to use systemic pest control because they are toxic. They have harsh chemicals in them. So you really want to measure out the amounts correctly and make sure that you use it on the appropriate plants, right? Because you don't want it to really like damage your plants if you use it inappropriately or by any chance hurt yourself, right? So that's one of the good example. And then I have another example here. This is also a insecticide. So they're pretty similar thing. You just basically mix it with the water, and then you water your plants, right? And I really want to show you this. So this is set right here, precautionary statement, all right? Hazard to human and domestic animal, right? So this, I would wear gloves when I handle it, and I will wash my hand before and after, because, let's say I used it, and after that I go pet my dogs. I don't want anything to, by any chance hurt them. So yeah, so these are toxic, and they are chemicals. So make sure that you use them appropriately. However, when you use them appropriately, they're actually really, 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 really effective. So yeah, so I used to have, I have different pests before. The one thing that bothered me the most is actually the fungus gnat. So again, I don't consider them a pest because they don't kill my plants, but they are very, very annoying and sometimes gross. So I did use systemic pest control, like insecticide, to to my plants, and within like 1 to 2 at most application, they're all gone. So yeah, so it works, right? If you can use it appropriately, it works actually really well. So just be careful of that. So that's one of the one of the advantages. And the second advantage for systemic pest control is, like I mentioned, for the neem oil or horticultural spray, which is more the organic method, it's only kill on contact. So if you have any, again, eggs, pupa, larvae that will stay in the soil, you won't kill them. However, this will kill everything. It will, because once you water your plant with the systemic pest control, the plant's going to uptake it. So anything that bite on the plant or eat the plant will get poisoned and died. I don't know why I'm laughing. This is bad, but they will die. So yeah, so those are the couple advantages of using systemic pest control insecticide. Be really careful. Like again, like these are toxic. They are chemicals. Make sure that you wear gloves. Make sure that you don't touch your kids or your dogs or your cats without washing your hand thoroughly before and after you use this kind of stuff. So yeah, so that will be my recommendation, and make sure you measure it appropriately too. So yeah, so those are the main systemic pest control. So I also want to show you this really quick, because remember I said earlier that like you really have to look at what kind of pest you're targeting, to determine what kind of pest control you use, right? So remember, right? So one of the more common type of pests, we may get on our plant is spider mite, and spider mite is not an insect, right? So that's why if you do have that particular problem, you will want to use something called let's see if I can get it focused. You have to look for something that say miticide. So meaning that it's kill mites, or you can, find something like that. It's like both a miticide and also an insecticide, right? So yeah, so you have to pay attention to small stuff like that. It's just like, oh, systemic pest control or like insecticide, I just pour it on my plants and hopefully it will work. No, you really have to read the labels. That's why I try, to explain to you how it works. So that way you guys can have a better understanding instead of just like blindingly just apply like chemicals on the plants. That can be good, right? So yeah, so those are the couple inorganic method, like more or less like they're the same because they have harsh chemicals in them, so they tend to like just kill the pest systemically. So yeah, so those are the couple of things that I would use in my household environment that I am comfortable with to manage my pests. So I know this part will be a little bit overlap. There will be a little bit of overlap in this part with, the previous, things that I talk about. So remember, we talk about water pests, we talk about where it come from, we talk about how to prevent them, and then we go into the organic route, which is, pest management that doesn't involve harsh chemicals or synthetic chemicals. And then we talk about like the hardcore stuff, like the systemic pest control, like the more like inorganic stuff that contain harsh chemical and may potentially harm like humans and domestic animal, right? So those are the stuff that you want to use carefully. So yeah, within, all the topics that we just talked about, I already mentioned a couple pests and then, the appropriate treatment to it. So that's why I say this part would be a little bit overlap, but I'm going to go into a little bit more details about a few common types of pests that we may encounter, especially in the indoor houseplant environment, right? So since most of the plants I grow are Hoyas, I can tell you the most common types of pests on Hoyas are mealybugs. So mealybugs, I'll put some pictures. So mealybugs are this like white cottony stuff bugs that you will find mainly in the nook and cranny, like between the stem and the patio, like at the this corner right there. It's where they like to hide the most, right? So you really have to look for them. But the good thing is they are somewhat larger in comparison to like mites, for example. They're somewhat larger in size, so you can see them pretty clearly, and they're white. So if you see those like cottony mass out of nowhere appearing on the nook and cranny of your plant, you may have mealybugs, right? They proliferate really fast, so you really want to take care of them as soon as possible. But the good thing is they are pretty easy to take care of as long as you can spot all of them, right? So horticultural spray or neem oil or just like alcohol, like diluted alcohol with like Q-tip. I'm sure you heard of this a lot. That's what people do. Or soapy water. You basically once you spray it on them, they just dissolve. It's very satisfying. You'll see and then the mealybug's dead, right? So yeah, so that is pretty easy, even though they proliferate fast, they reproduce fast, but they're still pretty easy to care for. And the only challenge is you just have to look for all of them. If you have to find all of them, and if you didn't get rid of all of them at the beginning, they will just come back. So it's always a good way to separate your plants, right? It doesn't matter which pest, but if you have pests on the plants, the number one thing you should always do is to isolate the plants first, right? Before it spread to other plants. So yeah, so you isolate the plants, right? You spray it if you found mealybugs on it, you just spray it with neem oil or horticultural spray, or if you use systemic pest control, you can use systemic pest control, and then that should take care of the mealybugs really quickly. So if by any chance you do not notice the mealybugs until it gets pretty bad, I don't know how, because it will just be all white. I don't know how you wouldn't notice it, but by any chance if you didn't, yeah, your plants will start looking a little bit looking droopy. The leaf will slowly turn yellow. So because the mealybug is sucking all the life juices out from your plants. So yeah, so I would say that is the first most common type of houseplant pests, especially on Hoyas, that I have ever encountered. Good thing is mealybugs is pretty easy to care for. The second most common type of pest that I have encountered are aphids. So aphids, I would say, is I don't really get too grossed out by insects, but aphids give me goosebumps. And the reason for that is because they don't come in one aphids. They come in 100 aphids at a time. So yeah, so aphids is just really poppy. They look like a little tapioca or boba, if you know what that is, but much smaller. They come in many different colors. They can be green. The one I encounter is mostly green. They can be green, they can be yellow, they can be black, they can be orange, they can be red. So there's a rainbow of color of aphids, right? So when aphids appear, most of the time they like to all gather, right? At either the flower bud, if your plant is about to flower, or at the very tip, the new growth of the plants, because aphids love the sweet juices from the youngest part of the plant. So you see all this little poppy thing, little balls, gathering right at the tip of your plants, and you know that is aphids, right? So similar to mealybugs, aphids is actually also pretty easy to care for. I personally actually think a sharp spray of water is the fastest way to take care of aphids. So I had aphids on the rose bushes in my my front flower bed, right? And all this aphid, like the green aphid, they just gather at the tip of the rosebud, right? Because they love the sweetness of the flower. So what I do is I just grab my hose. I have an outdoor garden hose, and I just like turn the settings to like sharp spray, and I just spray them, and then I just blast them off the plants, and ta-da, I got a clean plant. But obviously, you know, this again, just like non-systemic pest control, it only kills on contact, and they could like obviously they could come back like, you know, very soon, right? So, however, like even if they come back, they're not like, you know, that hard to care for. And of course, you can also use systemic pest control. However, because the roses, in my case, the roses is outside, and then there's like bees and stuff like that. I don't want to kill the bees by using insecticides or systemic pest control. So I just like, you know, keep using like the hose when I see them. I actually remember I did release ladybugs out there, but they flew away. I don't know if like a couple of them remain and feed on the aphids, but yeah, it's more or less, I would say, under control now, but it was pretty bad. However, they're not too hard to care for. So if you have aphids in your indoor houseplant, which I actually did before a long time ago, all you need to do is like you take the plant into the shower, I will recommend, and then you just, you know, use a shower head to like, you know, blast them off the plants, and then obviously separate the plants for like a few days to see if there's more coming out. But that's, you know, what I do for the aphids. They're not, you know, they're gross, they're not too bad, and if you are brave enough, you can just grab one of them and then you can like pop them. It's pretty satisfying. I don't know why, but yeah, so that's aphid. Okay, so those are the two types of pests, aphids and mealybugs, are the one that I encounter the most. I also encounter, and those are pretty easy to get rid of actually, like in comparison to the one that I'm gonna talk about later. So there is this one pest, I got it once, and it's named scales. So unlike mealybugs and aphids, which have a soft body, brown scale, they have this like harder brown shell on them to protect them. And they just basically, so if this is the plant, the scale will just, boop, they will just like stick on the plants and they won't move, right? Unlike mealybugs and aphids who, you know, who would move a little bit. But like, you know, scale, they just stick on there. And the problem is because they have this hard shelf on them. So if you just spray horticultural oil directly on them, it won't kill them. So you would really have to like scrape the scale off and show its soft belly and spray them, and they will die. So yeah, so that's why I say in comparison, right, mealybugs and aphids are fairly easy to care for because they have very little structural integrity. That's what I would call it. However, for scale, because they do have that hard shelf and they do stick on your plants, and the hard shell is like facing out, so it will be harder for you to just get rid of them. You really have to scrape them off. So unfortunately, if you have scale, you will either have to use systemic pest control, which will just kill them, you know, by poisoning them, or you would have to do a lot of manual labors by like, you know, scraping them off and kill them. Or if you do have enough plants, you use beneficial insect, that will also be really good to get it off scale. But yeah, but you know, scale, the other thing too is like, you know, if you have more like a woodier branch, like a brown branch, it will be harder for you to notice them because they're brown. But you know, if you have it on like your regular houseplant, which is mostly have like green or like juicier stem, it will be pretty easy to take care of them. So that would be for brown scales. All right, next we're gonna talk about the even more difficult to deal with pests. All right, so the first one I want to talk about is spider mites, because it seems like a common one. And this one, yes, it's more difficult to take care of for multiple reasons. Number one, they are tiny. They are mites. They are not insect. So they are much smaller. And a lot of time when I got questions from people, by the time they notice that, what is this like white rubbery thing on my plants? It's already too late. Like the spider mites may have already like infested the whole plant, and the plant is too far to save, unfortunately, right? So spider mites is a very small bugs that you would have to use magnifying glass to see them. And then they tend to form this like white rubbery thing on your plants. And they normally, most of the time, they normally appear when you leave your plant too dry. They love hot and dry environment. So if you forgot to water your plants, or if you have succulent outside, it's getting too dry and too hot, you might get spider mite. So those are the couple conditions for spider mite to appear. And this is just from what I heard from people. For whatever reason, Alocasia, which is, you know, a plant genus, also tend to have spider mite easier than other genus of plants. So yeah, so that will be the couple of things that I know about spider mites. If you want to treat spider mite, if you find spider mites on your plant and you want to treat it, you can either again use beneficial insect. There's spider mite predators that specifically is spider mites. There's also miticide, like the one that I show you. And if you do want to use systemic pest control, make sure that it's also kill mites, because again, mites is not an insect. So if you just use regular insecticides without reading the bottles, without reading that if it's actually kill spider mites or mites in general, you may not succeed. So that would be the couple of things you have to notice on spider mites. All right, next we're gonna talk about drifts. So drifts is difficult because it is also hard to notice, just like spider mites, but they are also extremely persistent. All right. So how do you find drifts, right? Before you actually see the drift, the easiest way to find, you know, to notice that your plant has drift is drifts. If you look at it in the microscope, or like, you know, yeah, in the microscope or in the textbook, you'll see that they have this like, the mouth, it's kind of like a scrape. So they will go onto your leaves and they will scrape off the chlorophyll of your leaves. So if you see your leaf have this like random scrape mark, and the leaf is no longer look like green, but more like silver, you may have drift. So that's the good thing. It's a, you know, it's a very obvious symptoms that you may have drifts, right? So to treat it very similar, like yes, you know, you can use horticultural soap or spray or whatnot. But you really do have to find them to kill them. And that's why if you have drifts, like I would recommend like just use systemic pest control to, you know, to manage them. Or if you, again, you know, can have enough plant to afford to use integrated pest management, which is, you know, beneficial insect, that would be another really good way to deal with drift as well. All right. Next I'm going to talk about is fungus gnat. So again, fungus gnat I don't consider as a pest just because they don't eat your plants. They eat the fungus in the soil mainly. So if you overwater your plants, like if your soil is like constantly moist, yes, you know, you probably will get fungus gnat, right? And they are annoying. Even though they don't kill your plant, they're super annoying. Like some people mistook them as like house flies, but they are not. Like if you look at them closely, they do look different. I think they look like a little bit skinnier than like, you know, the housefly. But anyway, yeah, if you get fungus gnat, the first thing you want to do is just make sure that, you know, your plant is not overly moist. Like you don't keep the soil like overly moist. And that's the number one, reason for fungus gnat to like reproduce, because the fungus gnat parents will basically, you know, fly, and then they will fly on the soil. They find like a moist spot, and then they lay their eggs, and then, you know, and then the babies come out, right? So that's why there's like so many of them, right? So if you find fungus gnats, I personally found systemic pest control is a great way to control it because they flies. So it's very hard to spray them with horticultural spray or neem oil, right? So that would be very effective. But if you don't want to use chemicals, excuse me, like I mentioned earlier, like BT, the mosquito beads, it's a great way to battle it. without using chemicals. The other really good thing to do is yellow sticky trap. So those are super affordable. You can get them in any garden center pretty much. So it's just this like, yellow sticky trap, yellow sticky like paper that you can like, just put on your plants, and the fungus net will just like fly to it, like more fly to the light. That's just their characteristics. They like yellow, they attract to yellow. So, and then they will just fly on that, and then they will stick on there, they will die. It is kind of gross to see there's like this yellow sticky trap become black because they are full of fungus net, but it's also very satisfying because, they don't bother you anymore. So yeah, so that would be fungus net is actually, they're annoying, but they are not like, again, they're not harming your plants, and also they are not too hard to deal with. So yeah, so that would be for fungus net. All right, last but not least, we're going to talk about special guest. And I want to talk about it because some people ask about it, and I think it's a fairly interesting biological fact that we can share. So some of you guys have ants on your plants. Ants, not on your kitchen counter, but on your plants, right? So if you have ants on your plants, I would suggest you to check for aphids. Because one thing ants does is they actually farm aphids, like human farm cows. The reason for that is because when the aphids eats the juicy part of the plant, which is what they love to do, that's why they're always at the flower bud or the new growth of the plants, they would secrete this sweet dew. And the ants actually will collect those sweet dew and bring it back to the ants' friends. And that's how they farm aphids. In fact, even if you don't have aphids on your plant to begin with, the ants would actually bring the aphids onto your plants so that, they will feed them. The aphids will be fed, and then the ants can actually farm what is secreted from the aphids. So I think that's a pretty interesting or amazing thing that, animals do in the ecosystem. However, as plant parent, we probably don't like it. So yeah, so if you see ants on your on your plants, I highly like for no reason, like you don't have ants in your house at all, like you don't leave food out in the kitchen or anything like that, it just randomly appear on your plants, I would highly suggest you to check for aphids. And then from there, like you can deal with the aphids, using either organic method or inorganic method based on your home environment and your personal situation, like we just suggested. I feel like I've been talking for a while. So yeah, so I know it's a lot of information about pest management. I try to like be not as in-depth, but more like just generally how do we take care of pests. And if you guys have any other pests that I haven't covered and you really want to know, make sure you leave it in the comments below so I can do some research on it. Like, I don't know if I think it's a fortunate thing that I don't have experience with all the pests, but I would like to know more about it. If you do have question about it, I'm happy to talk to some people and do some research on it. But yeah, so I would say pest is just part of the ecosystem. And like I said earlier, as a food chain, right? So if there's a prey, there's always a predators. If there are predators, there's always a prey. So this is just how plants and pests, or just insects in general, have been coexisting in the ecosystem for like long before human exists. So bear in mind that, they're not something that they're not supposed to be here. They are supposed to be there. But, it just, we decide that we want to bring this beautiful plant that are supposed to grow in the tropical, living with all these insects into our home. And we want to basically have a sanitized version of, of the ecosystem. So yeah, so bear in mind that. So again, they are there. We acknowledge that they're there. They're supposed to be there, sometimes. And if we have it, we just have to do our best, to manage it or to control it. So yeah, so that would be my personal perspective or personal take for, pests. I'm not saying that I love them. I'm saying that, it is sometimes unavoidable. So we just have to be knowledgeable enough to know how to prevent them and treat them. So yeah, so that's all I have got for you today. Like I said, it's a more like brief video. It doesn't meant to be go like super in depth. So if you have any specific particular question against certain type of plants or genus, or certain type of pest control or certain type of pests, feel free to leave in a comment below so I can like dig deeper in it or maybe film an extra video for that. So as always, thank you so much for listening to me talking for so long. If you like this video, make sure to click like. If you want more future video, make sure to click subscribe, and I will see you next time.